Humanity is a theme in Bungo Stray Dogs that is prevalent in every aspect of it. Whether it's an alternate universe, the motivations of our villains, or the existence of past characters, we're meant to think with our heads and our hearts. And in a manga full of characters that express the severe effects of trauma, contemplate the value of living, and have us questioning the meanings behind every little detail in the character design and storytelling, it wouldn't be alien to wonder which one of these is most human. And by that I mean, which character expresses the most flaws without direct solution? Which character has less cold fight scenes and more that show exposure as a human being? Which character isn't as cool as the others in a sense and gets sidelined because of it by both the anime studio and the fans? Chances are you saw the video you clicked on, so I'll just say it. It's Kunikida. Now, there's a lot to discuss about his character thus far and much more to unpack if we're ever going to make it out of this video alive. And on top of that, he has his own light novel. There's another universe Kunikida out there who I've hardly seen discussed, and all of these things baked up into a fresh pie make for a much needed analysis. So before anything, let's divide this video into 4 sections. The first will cover Dazai's entrance exam, the light novel dedicated to Kunikida's character, his relationship with other people in the novel and how the events affected him. The second will briefly go over Kunikida and the main manga. The third will cover Beast Kunikida and what he stands for, and the fourth will discuss the fandom's perception of him and how it got to be the way it is. So, thinking caps on, let's get into Dazai's entrance exam is about Kunikida coming to terms with bisexuality. Kidding, it's about Kunikida, his ideals, and their downfall. It's about him, his values, and his bleeding heart. It's about his love for humans, his routines, and the one person who disrupts those two. Well, really, the 2 people. To summarize, Dazai's entrance exam has 3 plot points. The first is the case of the Azure Apostle, someone who is said to be likely derived from another criminal the agency stopped called the Azure King. It's important to remember that the Azure King followed the same ideals Kunikida had, even more faithfully than him. Another detail we learn is that the Azure Apostle is directly targeting Kunikida by framing the agency for the crimes they've committed and taking lives in front of him specifically. More on that later. The second plot point, of course, is Dazai's entrance exam. This is the novel where he first joins the agency, meets Kunikida, and does whatever Dazai usually does: annoy me. Throughout this book, Dazai shows his surprisingly really good acting skills, his in-depth and suspicious knowledge of how crime works, and of course, acts as a foil for our third plot point, that being the mild romance between Kunikida and one of the victims of the case, Sasaki. Actually, the Azure Apostle, but we don't find that out until later. Put together, the book is more character-driven than plot-driven. I'm not afraid to say that some moments during the actual case solving were pretty slow, but that's also what made character interactions more interesting. I'll say it, Dazai might have carried this book a little bit. We open with a brief narration by Kunikida himself in which he questions what his ideals are and further what abilities are as a whole. It's just a brief segment, but the most important part is the line he writes in the beginning of his notebook: "Do as one should." Now, what does that really mean? Does it mean to do what is most correct in a situation, or in Kunikida's case, does it mean to do what his ideals say he should? Well, it seems like he's having trouble figuring that one out too. The premise of the book is that there's a chain of murders going on directly affiliated with the agency. The Azure Apostle, as they call themselves, is someone who is continuously leaving letters addressed to the agency with every life they take, each case becoming bigger than the last. All the while, Kunikida is assigned to conduct the entrance exam of the agency's new member, a man he describes as graceful despite looking like he cares little for his appearance. Now, I won't beat around the bush with this one, it's Dazai. Christ, I can't do one video without name-dropping him. Anyways, throughout the course of the book, we see Kunikida observing Dazai with the instructions to shoot him on sight should the need ever arise. After him, we're introduced to Sasaki. Throughout the book, it's heavily implied that Kunikida has romantic feelings for her because of his jealousy towards Dazai for being naturally charismatic, and, to an extent, she reciprocates those feelings as well. More so at the end. The third pivotal character is a 14-year-old boy named Rokuzo. For whatever reason, the shitty anime adapted version made him look like he's 20, and Kunikida leaning towards being a father figure for him came off as odd and out of place. Now, the first character we'll break down is Sasaki. She's said to be a woman with pale skin, long dark hair, a gracefulness to her, and apparently has anemia that renders her weaker than most. Anyways, right away we're aware she's an intelligent woman by her job as a professor, and also she's willing to help the agency. She doesn't really move the plot of the case they're solving too much, but she does make a fair share of appearances here and there. Most of them are Dazai teasing Kunikida in her presence while he tries to disregard his emotions because, after all, she's a client and a victim of a case. Such a gentleman. Their most significant interactions are the last 2 they have. The second last one being at a cemetery where Sasaki tells him about her deceased lover, someone she claims was a man with strong ideals that he was was referred to till the end. That's important for later. It's in this interaction we learn of a core difference of their views on the dead. See, Kunikida met Sasaki when he and Dazai were out on a case. In this case, there was a group of people who were murdered, the only sole survivor being Sasaki herself. Immediately after, the next chapter begins with Kunikida praying, "God, I beg you to return them to me." The phrase "to me" shows us that Kunikida values these lives as something he solely needs to be taking the burdens of. He blames himself, he carries the guilt with him. He believes that these lives are ones that should be returned to him. Sasaki, she doesn't see their lives that way. The important thing to remember is that there was a case prior to this light novel called the Azure King, who, as I said earlier, is someone who was defeated by the agency solely. This new case is led by Sasaki, someone who calls herself the Azure Apostle. For those who don't know, an apostle is a follower. The thing about the Azure King is that his way of delivering justice was by bringing criminals to light by committing even more heinous crimes. How did that work? Don't ask me, man. Anyways, when Sasaki is speaking to Kunikida in their second last interaction, she addresses the deceased as cruel cowards. This is where the fork in the road form for their views on living and life. Kunikida takes the burdens of every death we witness in the series, be it a random child that Fyodor deliberately planted to toy with him, or these 4 victims that he barely caught a glimpse of. Our villains know that. Fyodor and Sasaki did much the same to catch his attention. They both used his heart against him. Sasaki is also based off of Kunikida's IRL counterpart's ex-wife who divorced him due to their financial struggles during her pregnancy, and this is said to have affected him permanently, the same way Sasaki affects him in the light novel. But the thing is, in this novel, Sasaki does not love Kunikida. She loves his ideals and what they have the potential to make him. She loved the Azure King. And I know a good few of us here like their romance, but it's important to understand that her feelings for him were not genuine even if they were slightly reciprocated. Disclaimer, if you want to ship them, go ahead, but I'm talking about canon dynamics here. Sasaki was the Azure King's lover and she saw him in Kunikida. And since she was his apostle, she quite literally lived by those same ideals even more faithfully than Kunikida, who we see question his ideals, not follow them blindly. Throughout the novel, we see him struggle to figure out what's right and what's wrong. When is it time to use his own mind or his ideals? Meanwhile, Sasaki followed them without hesitation, uncaring for the consequences. I won't sit here and pretend Kunikida's feelings for her weren't genuine though. He did love Sasaki, but his love for her blinded him in the last stretch. She was his ideal woman and she symbolically stands for those very ideals. But there's a character in this novel that is exactly the opposite of her. A character that not only opposes those ideals, but is determined to do the opposite of what Sasaki is doing and bring Kunikida away from them. Okay, let's talk about Dazai. All bias aside, he was a wonder in this book. There is something so refreshing about having him goof around without going off in his own arc to play chess with a Sasaki if she was a Russian guy. This is a character Dazai was intended to be. Someone who is intelligent but only really focuses when he really needs to. The reason arcs have been a constant race of who gets what faster, and I don't know, I just recommend rereading the manga from the beginning if you want that early BSD vibe. The nostalgia counts, everybody. Anyways, in this book, Dazai plays the role of the agency's new hire. Fukuzawa explains to us in the beginning that Kunikida will be conducting his entrance exam and, as I said before, puts faith in him to make the correct decision and eliminate him if needed. The thing about Dazai that both Fukuzawa and Kunikida don't know is that he's from the mafia. And since Ango erased his background, it raised suspicion as to who this person really was. Throughout the book, Dazai really just lazes around and tosses the theatrics here and there, but his most significant moments is when he uses his knowledge from back in the mafia to help Kunikida solve the case and, of course, his flirtations with Sasaki. A method Dazai uses when we first meet him in the manga is a form of flirtation. He gets close to Higuchi to slip a tracker into her pocket, and in this novel, he sticks closer to Sasaki, more so observing her. This causes Kunikida to be jealous of his more flirtatious personality, and that, mixed up with how he just knows so much about the crime world, gives him enough reason to kill him, doesn't it? In a scene in the abandoned hospital they found Sasaki in, Dazai admits to being a spy for the Azure Apostle. That, combined with the suspicions, is enough a reason for Kunikida to raise his gun, ready to take his life. And he shoots. And then Dazai gets up like 5 seconds later because he didn't really shoot. See, ideally Kunikida would have killed Dazai. There's evidence against him, there's suspicion, and he's quite literally admitting it. Kunikida's ideals would tell him to end his life there. But here's the thing about Kunikida. His heart has always been stronger than his ideals. He believes he shouldn't kill Dazai. And in turn, Dazai trusted him not to kill him. Dazai trusted him with a loaded gun, and that trust was met. Mind you, they've only known each other for a small small period of time, but their connection is much stronger. And this is Dazai's role in the book. He is the person who challenges Kunikida's ideals, the person who forces Kunikida to go against them. He's quite literally the opposite of Sasaki narrative-wise. In the end of the book, when Sasaki is killed, Kunikida argues that there must have been another way until Dazai absolutely crushes his belief in this spectacular speech, saying that Kunikida's ideals alone will be his downfall. More on that later. In this narrative, Sasaki and Dazai are two extremes on either end of a balance, Kunikida being the only one directly affected by their beliefs. Does he abandon his heart to pursue his ideals? No, that would turn him into the Azure King. Does he abandon his ideals, something he's lived by for years? Before we question that, let's get into the third character, the one that doesn't stand for or against his ideals, the one who represents his heart and soul. Rokuzo was the son of one of the victims of the Azure King, a man that took away his father. He joined the agency after they cornered him for launching an internet attack against them, and Kunikida has subtly been keeping an eye on him since then. I'll say it here, there are many relationships in BSD that are misinterpreted as more of a parental-child dynamic. One of them, most famously, is Odasaku and Dazai. Odasaku is more of a friend figure to him. I've talked about that before. But since Dazai knew him at a young age, people tend to headcanon their relationship as more father-son. I'm one of those people who like to interpret it that way. It's not the canon dynamic, I understand that. So that's why I keep that characterization to fanworks and try to leak it into my interpretation of the characters themselves too much. However, in Kunikida's case, his relationship with Rokuzo is canonically meant to parallel his desire to nurture the boy in a more fatherly way. In fact, Rokuzo is based off the main character of one of Kunikida Doppo's short stories, one that was quite literally about the nephew of his landlord, Haru no Tori, which means bird of spring, was about a foolish boy who Doppo noted could run exceedingly fast and spent his days running around a mountain and watching birds. He would even get up early in the morning so that he could spend the whole day inside. In the story, the boy dies by jumping off a mountain believing he would fly. Now, it's important to remember that the boy Rokuzo is based on didn't actually die this way, but actually of natural causes much later. But this is how Kunikida saw him, as a bird of spring. Connecting to BSD, we could say that that's how our anime counterpart sees him, a bird that would fly too close to the sun and meet his end. This is why he takes care of him. This is why he watches over him. And when Rokuzo meets his death, we know for a fact that he's only the first of so many. The thing is, Rokuzo is the face of all those lives Kunikida believes he lost. His death is something the older man blames on himself, even though it wasn't his fault, and we all know that. Rokuzo died because he showed up to Sasaki's confrontation unannounced only for her to shoot him. And in the end, he eventually dies after shooting her back in vengeance for his father. Sasaki's death enraged Kunikida. He grabbed Dazai and yelled at him, blaming him mindlessly until Dazai spoke up and rendered him speechless. Dazai tells him that if he hunts down and attempts to eliminate everyone who opposes his ideals, he will always have a piece of the Azure King inside of him, and it will continue to consume the people around him and himself. The time he spends arguing about whether his ideals are right or wrong could have been spent observing Sasaki's behavior. His internal infatuation with how she was an idealistic woman and his feelings for her were not his downfall, but his refusal to use his head when the time called for it. The Azure Apostle Sasaki knew this. She used it against him, and do you know what else she used against him? His heart. The first attack where she was found by them, she eliminated 4 other people just to weaken him. Let's go to the main manga. What did Fyodor do to weaken Kunikida specifically? He presented a child in front of him like a puppet and killed her brutally. One of the most interesting things about BSD is the most popular characters are the cold and detached ones. They're the ones with these sick moments where they outsmart the others with their wit or strength. Dazai's whole appeal back in the days of early BSD was that people saw him as a cool, calm, suicidal guy who's all dark inside. Kunikida is weak. He's one of the few characters we see at his lowest. He's someone we see scream in agony when his ideals really do fail him. He's the one person we see mourn every little life openly. His enemies are aware of that and they use it against him. Kunikida Doppo is the most human character in BSD. He's flawed and he's stubborn, being put down by his ideals constantly and refusing to see their flaws. And in this book, we see him being tugged at all sides by the people saying that he should abandon his ideals. People saying he should embrace them doubtlessly. People who demand his heart more than the notebook ever could. The first page of his notebook says, "Do as one should." as one should, not what is ideal. But the word should is such a challenge, isn't it? Should is a necessity, but the kindness of heart show more kindness than is necessary. His ideals aren't a set of laws he follows and many people think. We literally see that in 55 minutes. Although granted, not many people read 55 minutes. Like seriously guys, read the damn novels. I'm getting tired of explaining all of them to you. There's so much info about the war in 55 minutes. Dazai's entrance exam is just peak Dazai antics. Stormbringer, well okay, you don't need to read the novel anymore, but come on, you still should. Anyways, if I were to ask you all to pause this video and debate among yourselves what it means to do what you should, I'm sure you would all start arguing among yourselves, because the thing is, there's never any way to decide what's really right and wrong in humanity. Let's look at the scene where he shoots Dazai. Let's pretend we don't know anything about him except for the fact that he's admitting to being the Azure Apostle and has allegedly killed many innocents. The right thing to do would be to shoot. But Kunikida's heart knew it wasn't Dazai. He made the wrong decision for the right outcome. That's why he's so complicated. That's why he's so human. The novel ends the same way it starts, with Kunikida and Dazai as partners. And yet, when Kunikida closes his eyes, all he can think of is the imprint of Sasaki's smile. Dazai says to him the more that he dreams of this ideal world of his, he will remain dissatisfied with the world as is. He will begin to resent it until the Azure King's flame burns at his heart. And now let's think about what changes between the present manga's Kunikida and the Kunikida we know in the light novel. On the surface, he hasn't changed, has he? Always one for ideals, always doing the things in the most correct possible way. But actually, there has been a significant change. In the light novel, there are many scenes where Kunikida tries to convince Dazai to turn to his ideals. There are multiple moments where he tries to polish Dazai into a fine employee despite Dazai's antics. And in the main manga, he's not doing that, is he? To properly analyze that, we will need to move on to the next segment. Hi. So the most he does to improve Dazai is to make sure to check on him and usually make sure he eats full meals. Usually due to Kunikida's more abrasive nature, people argue that he doesn't really care for Dazai, which is just, it isn't true. Think of it like the way he treats Atsushi. He cares for him. He cares for him deeply, even if his emotions are presented as tough love. Remember, Kunikida couldn't have asked for a better partner than Dazai. He was quite literally created to suffer alongside him, even if they aren't together. The last few arcs have been hell for them respectively, which, okay, adorable, they're suffering together, but you could argue that he might have just given up trying to change Dazai. But then we have Atsushi, who Kunikida trains to strengthen himself instead of forcing his ideals onto him. And this is where I'm going to talk about Tayama Katai. Katai is a character similar to Nikolai. Where his personality and goals are separate, their existence is ultimately to heighten the character they're tied to. Katai is yet another allegory for depression, something more evident in his living conditions and mannerisms than in the arc we meet him in. The part we'll talk about today is Kunikida and Katai's relationship. We know for a fact that Katai is somewhat of a burden to Kunikida in the eyes of the readers when you go through the manga in more of a surface level way. I mean, the man is just really a depressed dude who kinda annoys them in his arc. But the thing is, Katai is a really useful asset to the agency, and more than that, a friend of Kunikida's, like the IRL author too. So logically, he should be pushing his ideals onto Katai, or at least telling him to be a little bit more ideal, right? I mean, that's what he does to Dazai, right? But he never does it. Kunikida's only concern is for Katai to join the agency because at the end of the day, he is a powerful asset, and more than that, his friend. Kunikida's scolding always comes from a place of care and worry. He cared for Rokuzo and attempted to polish him because he feared that the little boy would meet his end. He cares for Dazai and Katai in the same way. Instead, Dazai is his partner and Katai is his best friend. I genuinely do not understand where the idea that Kunikida hates Dazai comes from, because at the end of the day, he's one of the characters that cares about him most. He makes sure that Dazai eats healthy meals, he checks on him twice a day, and more than anything, he trusts his partner. Segueing here a little bit, what people don't realize is that the idea that Chuya was the only person who ever really cared for and understood Dazai is stupid. Sorry guys, I had to say it. So just think about it. Mori checked in on his health, administered health shots, and treated Dazai after various attempts. Odasaku was Dazai's best friend and nursed him back to health when he first met him. Ango feels the guilt of what he did to Odasaku and is willing to do whatever Dazai asks of him. Chuya is the one person Dazai trusts most. It's true, their bond remains strong despite whatever the current status of their relationship is. But also, Fyodor has canonically said that the most significant part of his life was playing chess with Dazai. And Dazai is said to be the most human around people as intelligent as him. Sigma cares for Dazai too. He trusts him to save him even though there's a chance he could manipulate him. Atsushi is a sweetheart and respects Dazai as both a friend and a senior. I could go on and list relationships that show even the slightest care for Dazai because that's who he is. He wants to die but doesn't want to burden anyone with his death. What he doesn't realize is that the longer he's here, the longer he has people who will care for and depend on him. To muddle down his relationships to Mori is his abuser, which, to be fair, he is. Chuya is his only friend and everyone else hates him is stupid because that's literally the opposite of what his character stands for. I gotta stop talking about this weirdo. Back to the manga, there's actually another character that many don't address in his connection to Kunikida. I find it confusing how no one points out the biggest aspect of Kunikida's parallel with Dazai. Where Dazai wants a reason to live deep down, Kunikida wants to die. He wants his ideals to kill him so that he can prove to himself that they, and by extension he, is worth something. Jono outright says it. He literally just goes, "Oh, you wanna die so bad, don't you, gay boy?" But the attention this moment has is abysmal. Oh, that's right, Chuya shows up like seconds later and everyone went insane over that, right? God, the influence of this one. Anyways, Jono is a parallel to Kunikida as well. I explained his views on justice in my hunting dogs video, and the thing is, his views are similar to Kunikida's. He believes in serving justice, but using his mind when the time comes and letting certain moments fly by. If Jono blindly followed justice, he wouldn't be as intense about serving punishment where punishment is due. But Jono lacks something Kunikida has. He lacks his bleeding heart. He lacks that weakness in Kunikida that comes from the lives he loses. If Jono were to witness that child Fyodor planted dying, he would accept that it wasn't his fault, nor something he could have stopped. Kunikida cares too much about every little life except his own. He's willing to die if it means his ideals may live, that they may be worth something. He's willing to save every child he sees, and he's willing to push himself to his limits without a care for his life. Remember, he wants his death to come by his ideals. He's not going to force them on others, but he will try as he might to believe that they will at least save him. He's literally suicidal, guys. Like, come on, that's so messed up with how he has a whole book on living. And what about our villain? What does Fyodor tell us about Kunikida? Something that not many people talk about is how Fyodor is quite literally Kunikida's greatest enemy. A man who sees value of every life that is lost in his eyes, and a man who is willing to wipe out as many as it takes for a better world. Fyodor doesn't regard Kunikida as a real foe, we know that much. Instead, he sees him as an obstacle, something that needs to be trampled first because Fyodor knows that he's the heart of the agency. The first thing you need to do to get to them is to weaken their strongest man, and that is Kunikida. The cannibalism arc was specially crafted to break the agency apart because he knew a select few of them would stick by Kunikida's words and orders. The same goes for when the agency was attacked by the hunting dogs. Remember, Fyodor has been pulling the strings all along. It's not a coincidence that Kunikida was beat down to his lowest, even going so far as losing his hands in the process of trying to save the agency. It has been Fyodor's doing all along. And then we reach the current arc in the manga, the arc where Fyodor finally kills, quote-unquote kills, Kunikida. This is it, isn't it? He gets stabbed in the chest and his last words are just a small hope. The hope that his ideals will live on. He looks relieved to meet his end, believing what he's meant to believe in. So we all know he's coming back, right? Yeah? Okay, good. Kunikida is a beautiful character. Asagiri has made it clear that he adores him, but more than that, he has stuck to what Kunikida was initially made for. He is literally suffering alongside Dazai even when they're apart. But what about the universe where he never met Dazai? What about...
Wake your ass up because it's time to go beast mode.
I've been bottling this up for so long. Do you know how fucked up it is to read about Kunikida and Akutagawa fighting when that's literally his dad in another universe? I don't get paid enough to suffer like this, I swear to God. We meet Kunikida in Beast as mostly the same character. He's still scolding and strict and an idealist at heart. That is, save for his relationship with two of the agency's members. In this universe, Odasaku is Kunikida's partner, which is such an upgrade from this thing, but their dynamic is adorable, I'm gonna say it. Just look at them. We need to put Kunikida around random ass people more often, guys. But by far, the most significant difference between Beast Kunikida and the Kunikida from our main universe is his blue tie. See, in the previous universe, we know for a fact that the color blue has been messed up in his perception forever, Azure Apostle and all that. This blue tie tells us that case never happened, and if it did, it didn't scar him so badly. In this universe, Kunikida isn't fearing for his ideals and what they make him. He's essentially free of his own mind, free of being stuck pondering whether his existence means anything. And with that out of the way, we see another side to him. We see the side of Kunikida that we never get to see in the main universe because every child is wrenched from his hands. Kunikida's fatherly behavior is adorable. Since the conditions of Akutagawa and Atsushi are different, we have more time to meet his character for the first time all over again. We get to see how he needs to essentially teach Akutagawa patience and how to control his temper. With Atsushi, the case was different because he was never on a race against the clock to find anyone. And, of course, Asagiri had much more creative freedom in Beast. We're actually allowed to stop here and get time to know the characters. That's why characters like Kenji and Tanizaki seem so much less flat than they are in the main story. We get to hear their motivations. Contrary to this, Kunikida isn't as complex in Beast. All we really get to see in his character is how much he learns to care for Akutagawa, and that's fine because this story isn't about him. That's why his most significant moment comes in during his fight with Atsushi. Nearing the end when Akutagawa has lost his sister and all energy to keep fighting altogether, he struggles to keep going. He insults himself and admits that everyone is right. He is a being made of evil. Even remembering Odasaku's words not to chase the beast inside of him feel like nothing. That is until Kunikida shouts at him from over a radio. He tells Akutagawa he's not evil, and then we see this gorgeous depiction of him from Kunikida's eyes. Throughout the series, we have many people who see Akutagawa in varying ways. Dazai sees him as an inconvenience. He's an abuser despite acknowledging his strengths. Atsushi sees him as a rival, sometimes even someone to save. Kunikida sees him as what he is, a child that has been hardened by the world but is still a child at his core. This creates this gorgeous parallel between Kunikida and Dazai once more. Both of them were mentors to him, but one of them made him a worse, more broken person, while the other showed him kindness and patience and resulted in him growing into someone a little softer. In fact, Kunikida's relationship with children in the series is always centered around his care for them. Look at Aya, a little girl he barely knew but was so determined to save. A little girl who saw his bravery and that influenced her to trust the agency when no one else did. She's a character that lets him exist without a parallel to Dazai so that we know he is more than a story's plot point. She exists to show us further how much Kunikida cares for children. When it comes to Atsushi, we know that Kunikida has trained him from the ground up in combat. We know that their relationship is deep. This is because Kunikida cares for the children he has a chance to save in tandem to feeling the guilt of the ones he couldn't. He has a brief character in Beast, sure, but that briefness only makes him more impactful because we can take this opportunity to set aside his guilt and flaws and focus on his strengths. But that begs the question, why? I've spent this entire video explaining the complexity of Kunikida when you could be an anime watcher wondering why he's perceived how he is in the anime and even by the fandom. Well, that brings us to... If I were to ask you to name an iconic duo in BSD, and I mean one duo that is the series' most popular signature, chances are you'll say Sokoku. Because, well, they do define the anime in a way. Whenever you hear about BSD, the first thing you will hear about is these two and their enemies to lovers dynamic. But what people don't realize is that Chuya and Dazai weren't intended to be as front and center as they are now. In a recent interview, Kafka Asagiri said that his intention has been to include Kunikida in the story more, but his screen time seems to be being sucked up / absorbed by Chuya in a way. In another section in the same interview, Asagiri details that there was a higher demand to include the Sokoku duo in the series by the producer of the anime, likely because these two have been stealing the spotlight since their first appearance. This is understandable. See, it's the producer's job to make sure that their anime is getting the highest potential viewers, and a means of achieving that is catering to the fans. And since the largest portion of these fans are people tuning in for this duo, to ask Asagiri to continue to add them to the story is understandable. Man's just doing his job. However, here's the thing about Kunikida. He's supposed to be Dazai's current partner and Chuya is supposed to be his previous partner. It's difficult to emphasize that Dazai is no longer associated with the mafia when he's being constantly paired with his alleged ex-partner and blurring the lines of where he really stands. And resultantly, with the increase in demand for Chuya scenes, Kunikida's moments were pushed aside. Furthermore, Asagiri says in that same interview, I want Kunikida to have a more active role. The Kunikida Dazai duo is one that I feel like I could write as much as I want if I had the time. The reaction to this line by the fandom was stupid, to put it bluntly. In fact, the reaction to the interview in general was disrespectful and disgusting. As the person who mainly compiled the interview to show all my favorite parts, I can confidently say that this fandom is doomed. First off, people started sending Asagiri death threats and getting mad at him for saying Sokoku hate each other. Granted, a decent chunk of people were good-natured about the whole thing, but as we all know, the stupider people are always the louder ones. In fact, people were so mad about that statement that they started spreading the rumor that I stole translations from this other account before they even posted the translations, by the way, and when they did, they turned on them too and stated that they are lying as well. Yep, Totally not toxic fandom right here. Anyways, the line that I was talking about earlier was met with the same reception. People replied, why doesn't he just write another light novel if he likes them so much? Or even just do what you want? To which I reply, it's not that simple. He can't write and publish something without people around him dipping their hands in to approve it. He may have ultimate control of his works, but he does not have total control. People tend to forget the influence editors and anime producers have on the show. An editor isn't just a beta reader, but someone who makes sure that the work meets the public criteria of something that can sell really well. Sales come first, artistry comes second, which once again is the editor's job. Kato-san, Asagi's editor, is someone who influenced the series multiple times. It was him who argued over Chuya's final design the most and even said to give corruption a sort of activation line. He told Harakawa to tone down some of the gore in her panels. Like I said, he made sure things are public friendly. But what does all of this have to do with Kunikida? Like, this is a Kunikida video, why am I yapping about editors and producers? Well, it's partially because these decisions were what caused Kunikida to be pushed aside. You see, in the first season, we have this duo of Kunikida and Dazai, two polar opposites that should never work so well together, but do. If you hop onto any discussion about Kunikida on Twitter or Reddit or TikTok, you'll find a chunk of people insisting that he's boring and nothing special. Another thing you'll notice is that these people are usually just anime watchers who picked up the manga after the last season. The thing is, they're right. Kunikida doesn't offer a law in the anime. All he really does is scold people with that same expression, and we're expected to believe that somehow he's able to keep up with Dazai, someone they actually exaggerate the expressiveness of. Never a bad thing, by the way. Sure, he has his own OVA, but not a lot of people tune into it because the tradition in anime that pertains that they usually contain unimportant or extra content. However, in the manga, Kunikida is much softer. Whether it's in his expressions or his words or the way he treats Atsushi specifically, he is much more gentle than we've seen. In fact, something that most of us know is that Dazai's entrance exam was merged into the first season for whatever reason, but also since they only merged it and didn't adapt it fully, the anime picks up about a quarter through into the novel. So obviously, if his light novel is poorly adapted, if his manga arcs are rushed in favor of others, and if the producer is demanding more of a character that can't coexist with him, obviously Kunikida will be sidelined. We don't read light novels that we don't have any interest in, do we? I'll go first. I haven't read the Gaiden novel yet because I want to tune into the manga instead. So let's say people watch the anime first. If the Kunikida we're given in the anime is nothing burger compared to his manga version, no one is going to read his light novel. A similar phenomenon occurs with 55 Minutes. It's centered around characters we don't know, and Dazai, the moneymaker, is sidelined for most of it. Now look at the light novels 15 and Stormbringer. They have huge audiences in the fandom and have had them before being adapted into mangas. This is because Chuya and Dazai aren't skipped over in the anime. They aren't sidelined because they are what brings the audience. All of this combined, when you look at a character that's been shoved aside in favor of making this manga more marketable, we only see what could have been. Kunikida doesn't feel pushed aside in Beast because there's no need to make this manga more fitting to anime watchers. Mark my words, when Studio Bones gets its grubby hands on Beast, the final product will leave much to be desired. Because they don't care about storytelling and character growth. The producer's job is to market Bungo Stray Dogs as a product. And I'll say it, Sokoku is the most marketable thing it has. It's sad to say, but this is Kunikida's fate. We'll likely never get another moment where he's allowed to shine. His arcs from now on may never precede the character he's been set up to be. He's a hero. He's human. And it is absolutely insane to me how he's gone from having his own light novels and characters surrounding him to being shoved into the background for the majority of the arcs. It's not fair, but there's nothing we can do about that, my dear viewers. Only appreciate the remnants of what could have been. Ironic, isn't it? He really went from being one of the main characters in season 1 to a character that when he hugs Atsushi, it doesn't feel as rewarding because they really don't have a solid base for their relationship. Other than a few scenes here and there, of course. Sure, Atsushi went with him to meet Kata, but we seldom get to see one-on-ones with Kunikida and any character at all because he really is being sidelined and we've been told as much. So when someone comes to you and asks you about the most human character in BSD, and you for some reason say Kunikida, I'm sorry, but they won't believe you. His current character is a byproduct of executive decisions and a lack of care for storytelling. But how can I conclude this essay when we haven't even had a conclusion to his character yet? So instead, I'll leave you with a quote from the author Kunikida Doppo himself. After all, no matter how much you wish to, you can't live off of ideals. No matter how much God tries, he can never kill me. Hello everyone, Happy New Year! And a thank you for 6K. I think I got those two mixed up with the pronouns like the in the end. But thank you all so much for 6K. And a happy new year to all of you. Thank you all for tuning in this year. Thank you all for watching my videos. And I have a special announcement before anything else though. I'll be leaving the link to Arab.org and leaving the tags you need to use to spread awareness for Turkish women. Remember, those things are much more important than anything I have to say or any video essay. Now, the next thing that I need to tell you guys is that I have a Patreon. That's right. I know you've all always wanted to give me money, and now you can do that. There are two tiers for my Patreon. The first, the tip jar, and the second is the mailbox. The mailbox tier is the coolest tier because you guys will get to access my videos 24 hours before the general public, leave your comments, and of course, I'll do small Q&A bits where I'll answer all your questions in the most depth I can and give you guys works in progress for my videos. Please do check it out. The link will be in my description because it will help my channel grow. Of course, once again, no obligation. Just letting you guys know that maybe you'll see your name at the end of my next video. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. There's actually a lot of stuff I wanted to bring up in this video that I couldn't. The first thing was that in this light novel specifically, you get to see that the general public turns on ability users really quickly, and I want to note that, but I didn't have the time to squeeze it in. The second was Kunikida's respect for Rampo, but that's what everybody respects Rampo, so it's not something exclusive to him. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Once again, please go to Arab.org, get your daily clicks in. Don't just wait for me to remind you. You guys should do this every single day. Please spread the tags for awareness for Turkish women. They are not safe yet. They're still in danger. And do check out the link in my description. I'll also be leaving a link to the interview that I was talking about in this video, so you guys will be able to access that. And other than that, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll ask my new patroners which video they want to see next so my patroners can decide. And other than that, bye-bye.